Hi everyone, thank you so much for being with us on our mighty panel. We have all the super people here and a super crowd. All the people that matter are here for this very almost penultimate session, I think. So I think I'll start with some introductions. So if you'd all like to maybe just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your company.
Yep, I'll go first. My name is Anita. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Iris.ai. We, in short, build smart tools for researchers, mainly corporate R&D. We've been in this space for a while, so we're not kind of currently born out of the LLM hype, but have been around the space for a bit. And I'll stop there.
I'm Brian Mullins. I'm the CEO of Foundry. We were spun out of the University of Oxford, and we focus on high-stakes applications of AI. So if a decision affects somebody's life or is made at the scale of populations.
Hello, so I'm Peter Sarlin, professor at Aalto University and CEO and co-founder of Schjøll. Schjøll is a private AI lab, one of Europe's largest with 250 people, majority PhDs with a senior background in AI-related fields, and we build AI-driven products.
Hi everyone, I'm Davio. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Radix. We help other companies use AI. We do that in Europe and in the US, companies such as GSK, Atlas Copco, Johnson & Johnson, so larger companies, and we help them throughout their journey with AI.
Fantastic. And on that matter, we're going to try and dig in a bit to some of the very tangible use cases of AI, how companies are driving value and making change and automating and doing all kinds of efficiencies. Because I know there's almost so much talk around things like ChatGPT and generative AI. But maybe, Peter, can you maybe give us a bit of a walkthrough about how you see AI creating value, maybe some ideas that have come from your company?
Yeah, I think to start with, I think the important part is to understand what AI really is today and what it maybe isn't. Now everyone is talking about generative AI and large language models, and that certainly is sort of an innovation that is relevant and creates value. But I've been looking at it from sort of a, say, both scientific viewpoint, but then also from an industrial viewpoint, and the innovation that really sort of has happened lately, in my eyes, isn't necessarily that much of a scientific innovation, but more product innovation. You say end user or user experience innovation. A lot of the, say, large language models that we're using today, we've had and we've been applying for the past several years. And of course, you know, moving from millions to billions of parameters improves them. But I think eventually what we really have today is sort of large generic models that are so-called foundation models, and then that are fine-tuned for various very bespoke purposes. And I think eventually, to sum up sort of what that implies for industry, is that they will basically be embedded into products. And products that have distribution will be the ones that actually succeed in creating value to end users. And I personally see a lot of similarity between what Tesla did for self-driving and what OpenAI and Microsoft have done now for software companies. So basically, we will see a lot of push for software companies in general integrating some of the latest technologies into their products.
And what about you, Davio? How do you see this progressing? Like, what do you sort of think the next iteration is going to be in terms of applications and use cases?
That's almost an impossible question. It's similar like asking
Ambitious.
Where will electricity be used? I think, so the answer to that question is it will be used everywhere. I think it's probably the most transformational technology we've seen so far. Now, what I do think, so it's going to be used everywhere, but what I do think is that to be able as a company to get there, you need a lot of guts and vision to do it, because I do think that what we see is that it's not just only optimizing some sort of process. Companies need to be able to rethink workflows and rethink their organization, and that needs strong leadership, visionary leadership, and guts to do it. And I think that's the most important challenge for companies now having this technology available.
Yeah. And Brian, I know I interviewed somebody last week who said to me that when talking about use cases, the one that they felt that they couldn't really get behind was military and defense. But I know you've worked with some clients, I guess, or customers in that area. Are you able to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I think that everybody understands that the space is very important, that the stakes get very high. What we do is about understanding from first principles how the models work, when they're appropriate to combine with what's represented in the data, and then to consider what are the interventions that are going to be taken as a result of this system, and what are the directions of those interventions. And I think when the stakes get really high, like they do in defense, that we need people to be thinking about that, and that people that go into the space without that consideration aren't addressing what's making people, like you mentioned, uncomfortable, right? And one of the things that we feel really strongly about is supporting the people that keep us all safe, but doing it in a way that is responsible, that starts from first principles about understanding how the tech is working and where it's appropriate to use it, and where it's just not, because the way that the systems work, some of the unpredictability, when it can't be quantified, when you can't understand the failure modes, isn't compatible with those applications.
Yeah, absolutely. I would imagine defense maybe using things like programming satellites, forecasting, things like that.
Yeah, so I think that specifically in the defense space, the industry is so large, and it's one of many verticals that we work in. You find a lot of the same applications, right? Some of them are logistics. We have a lot of equipment, we have a lot of people. How do we make sure that we can make sure that people are trained and make sure that the equipment is maintained? Many of the things that you would see in a business, and not dissimilar to the work that we do around government infrastructure or in the insurance space, where it's about looking at very complex systems, using machine learning to understand risk, and then making better, more informed decisions about the system based upon an understanding of that risk.
And Anita, I know you're very sort of deep in the research space. So I'd be curious to know where we're at in terms of, the role that your workplace does and having a fully, I guess, virtual AI scientist.
Which has always been our goal, to build an AI researcher, as we call it. So right now, what our tech is really good at is tracking facts across scientific text and tables and images, et cetera. And so kind of the next step for us is more kind of factuality metrics, right? Which is something that's missing right now, especially in the LLM space. How do we actually measure and quantify whether this is accurate or not? From a kind of a scientific perspective. And our current technology will allow us to go there, factuality metrics and also data set curation. With that, we can actually move into kind of post-processing of a lot of the text that's being generated. So that's kind of our next steps after that, to have like adding on a post-processing layer to go, actually, this is incorrect. It's like really annoying teacher that goes, that's wrong. Moving on from there, kind of automating the data set curation, again, from scientific text, from that kind of human-made knowledge space. So adding in kind of the automatic data set curation, then kind of injecting those data sets and that knowledge into large language models, and that will get us closer to what we call the AI researcher, or a more kind of conversational AI that can actually help solve some of the big questions that we're facing from as scientists and as researchers.
And something that's come up a lot today, if we look at buzzwords, is things like fairness, bias, ethics, all these things. I'd be interested to know, maybe Davio, you could start. I know you've been doing work with, for example, airports, and maybe you can give some examples of how you're able to embed that in your approach working in, with these large corporations.
It's a very interesting question. So when it comes down to fairness, the challenge is what AI makes it very interesting is to show that the challenge is not in AI, the challenge is with us. And that's where it is really now showing that we need to address it. To give you, so why am I saying this? There are problems with fairness in society anyways. That's the case. The problem is that usually we don't know that there are, because they are in the head of people. Now we're able to see that in AI models. We're able to quantify that, and to go a step further, we're even able to choose what type of fairness we want. The challenge is we need to choose that, and that's usually where it goes wrong, because a lot of companies don't choose that, and by not choosing it, they de facto leave it up to the developer choosing it. And why do I say choosing? There is not one way of being fair. There's a typical example of the 3 kids watching over a fence or trying to watch over a fence for a football match, and you have a small kid, you have one in between, and you have a larger one. The larger one can look over the fence when he stands on its toes. The middle one can't see it, and you have a small one who can't see it at all. And you have 3 boxes. To whom do you give the box? If you give everyone 1 box, that's a way of being fair. But then only the large one and the middle one can see. But if you have to give 2 boxes to the small one can see. If you give 1 box to the middle one can see, and the third one can see as well. So they can all see. But what's fair? That depends on your choice. That's a choice. And that's a simple example, but there are over 20 forms of being fair. So what we see is that you need to make a choice. And what we see is that the most mature companies are the ones that actually have something which is often called an ethical board, where they, depending on the use case, if there is fairness involved. There are some cases, if it's about predictive maintenance, you don't need an ethical board. But if it's about job matching, for instance, you might need one. So we work for the Flemish Public Employment Service, and what we help them develop is a tool that can recommend jobs. And there it's important that you do that in a fair way. And then you need to have people looking at it and saying, okay, that's the way we want to be fair. And I think they are one of the most mature companies or organizations we know, because they don't only have an ethical board, they even have people from inside and outside looking at the use cases and judging what fairness would mean in the context of a specific use case.
Yeah, and Peter and Brian, I mean, when you're working with clients, how do you manage the expectation of what they think AI can do versus the reality? And do you ever get in scenarios where maybe somebody wants it to do something that might not be entirely ethical?
Yeah, I think there's been many good examples of use cases, and as Davio said earlier, AI is sort of everywhere, and it's gonna go to even sort of further places. But at the same time, and especially now coming back to sort of managing expectations, I do think it's very, very important to sort of understand who should build and who should use AI. I think Iris and Anita is a good example of a product company where the product obviously has AI in it, but it needs to have a lot of other things as well to create value eventually to the end user. And I think this is really sort of the key sort of thing for companies to understand, is that if they are engaging with AI and building AI, they're engaging with building a product, a digital product or service. And that implies that that's a long initiative, it's going to be a long journey, and sort of your expectations need to be sort of aligned with the fact that AI is not going to be ready immediately, and it will usually need to be at the core of your service, product, process, so that you are continuously collecting more data, you're continuously getting feedback, you can become better and better and better over time. And that you need to really commit to build sort of product. And this is also what we do at Silo. So we work with, say, autonomous vehicles, we work with smart devices, we work with various types of fairly large R&D initiatives where we believe it's reasonable to succeed and create enough value compared to the investment of actually building.
I would add, and I think everything that he answered was spot on. I would add from our perspective that both parts of that question are closely related. I think it starts with what do you really want the outcome to be? And if what you want is to have an AI system, then I would argue you may not understand what you want, right? And if that is your objective, you'll get an AI system, but you won't quite know what it's going to do and what you should do with it. The second question, of course, do we have to tell people that something's unethical? I think we're in the situation where our customers come to us because they know that there could be problems and they expect us to tell them that. But I would say that across the industry, we should all feel very comfortable telling people that, hey, you don't want to do this. That's not what your data says, and that's not what this model's capable of. And I think the people that work with the technology should feel okay and feel it's part of what we can give to customers, whether it's in the products that we make or the services that we do for them. And I think that second part is at the core of what we do is about alignment. The technical, not the philosophical, but the technical, process of understanding what are the values and objectives of an organization and making sure that the objectives of a system, specifically systems like AI that are very good at optimization, are aligned with those objectives and consistent with those values. And so you've got to start from the beginning and look throughout the entire life cycle and make sure that you're creating a system that can be aligned with those things.
I mean, sort of a general question around that. Do you think companies, or anybody, feel free to answer, of course, are able to align that kind of ethics within their own workplace? So are they able to embed that so their own employees feel that they can call out if they think something is problematic or maybe used for unintended consequences or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, it comes back to the first question of what can AI do and what can't it do, right? It's not magic, right? It's math. And understanding what it really can do probably will also make people a little bit less afraid that it might wake up and kill us all. And then you can have a productive discussion about, hey, what are the real risks? Because there are real, tangible risks, but they can be well understood and they can be addressed.
For sure.
Yeah, I'd just like to add that I think there's been a lot of discussion around ethics for quite a while already, and at the same time I do think there are technical solutions to many of these issues, and I think we will be able to tackle them. I'm fairly optimistic about that. But there's, I think, one significant change in the past few months, and that comes obviously with ChatGPT and all of that. We at the moment we have machines that are passing the Turing test. It's not that we have AGI, or it's not that we have anything sort of beyond human capabilities, super intelligence, but we have machines that pass the Turing test. And that can have significant implications on society as a whole. And I think that's something that we should be concerned with.
Yeah, any final thoughts? We've got a minute. Anita, did you want to add anything?
No, I think there is, when we talk about ethics, I think there is a large amount of, there are bad actors doing deliberate bad things, and there are a significant number of them. And we were discussing earlier during lunch, what happens when a lot of these large language models are open sourced, because then they can be really taken and used for anything. But I think I'm still more concerned, at large scale with, by people who are doing, doing unethical things by, oh shit, we didn't think that far, did we? And I think there is still a lot of that where people don't think that far and don't think through their data properly. And we are talking about it more, but I think there is a lot of that, like, ooh, this sounds like a great idea, let's do it. Build it and hope that it doesn't break or break a few eggs in the process. But I'm still more concerned about that part where people don't have ethics boards, where they don't kind of properly think through their projects before putting them out into the world and hoping for the best.
Did you want to add anything, Davio?
In both things, I think that will naturally solve itself. Definitely the ethical part, that is indeed a bigger challenge. But if you ask me, what I'm most concerned about is the fact that so there's a lot of talks in Europe around large language models and should we do something or not. And I think that's what I'm more concerned about. And definitely if, and sorry for my words, the stupid ideas are that we should stop AI, just like bad actors will stop as well. It's like, let's stop and let's let them develop weapons, and then definitely we won't have problems. Well, I can tell you then you'll have problems. So I think what is more important, and why I hope Peter will be doing more of what he is doing, is that we need that kind of technology in Europe as well, and own that technology as well, because it's not only the tool of the future, it's also the weapon of the future. We need to own that. There's conversations tomorrow in the European Parliament from academics on how can Europe be competitive, and that's the things we need to do, not just think about it, do stuff. The only thing which I'm worried about is that it's a lot of academic and politician talk, which, no bad word said about them, but which I think should be dealt with industry as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And not only the big tech, but also the smaller players and the fast-growing players, because they will be the ones that will have to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's strong finishing words and a lot for us to all to think about. So it's been a great panel. Thank you so much for your time today. And thank you, everybody, for joining us this evening.
Thank you.